Thank you so much for joining us today. Our topic is procurement expertise, telecommunications, and medical waste management. My name is Megan Klein, and I will facilitate our meeting today. Please note, the information contained in this presentation is intended to provide general information, but not advice about certain regulations and initiatives. This is not intended as legal or other advice, and each situation may vary depending on the particular facts and circumstances. You should not act upon this information without first consulting qualified legal counsel. And now, please welcome Doug Pickett to tell us more.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're really excited about today's session as it is a very educational session about ancillary spend. I lead our procurement services division in direct supply, DSSI, where we partner with our operators to help them optimize their use of technology, the DSSI platform, and how they do their procure to pay. We also work with them using large data in order to help them optimize their spend through formularies and order guide management. In addition, we help them drive compliance through spend optimization and spend management practices. Since we started, and many of our operators who have used DSSI for many, many years, the focus has really been on their core categories of spend. They know to the penny the amount of money that they're spending on things like bananas, gloves, glucose strips. Past that and seeing the opportunities with areas in their ancillary spend. We've spent years really mastering how we manage our food and supply spend, and most recently, we've been able to maximize our technology as well as our data to help us manage our purchase services. If you think of tools like DSSI Capture and Rex, as well as the integrations that we have with TEL's building services, we've been able to manage that spend very efficiently and understand how to budget for that with the reporting that we get. Where we struggle, though, is in the ancillary that we call, which is about 44% of the spend. This spend is really fragmented. There's very little management to it. It's not consolidated. Contracts are pretty much all over the board. And we really don't have any visibility into any reporting, so it's hard to budget for and hard to control. So for the past few years, we've really dug into data. We've looked at backfeed data coming through DSSI, as well as data that we've seen in DSSI Capture, to start identifying areas of spend that we believe we can start building solutions to. So what have we found? And you'll see in this graph, we have a dollar per bed spend, and where we're seeing opportunity is right to the right in the gray. The long tail does offer us opportunity. We see opportunities to drive savings in many different categories by bringing in aggregation and bringing in technology. Two of the areas that we really want to focus in on today are internet and telephone and medical waste management. So we have the privilege of having guests with us today, so I'd like to turn over to our first guests that are going to represent Direct Supply EngagedPro, and that is Tom Paprocki, our Managing Director at the ITC, as well as Ted Berg, the COO of EngagedPro. I'll turn it over to you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Doug. I'm Tom Paprocki. I run the largest center in the United States that's focused on emerging technology, senior care, and entrepreneurship. I'm used to giving presentations with prototype technology that always fails to work in the moment that you need it. So, Doug, as your heart rate goes to 185, 190, I've been there, and thank you for being the person who's in charge of advancing the slides. So I tend to focus typically on kind of what's next. In this case, this is not anything that's particularly revolutionary. The good news is that it saves you money, and with that money, you can start to focus on some of the things that are resident-facing or can kind of advance your organizations in new ways. So we're going to go through a little bit about that. I'm going to turn it over to Ted for a brief intro, and if you would, Doug, would you mind just clicking one time? As I pulled Ted's profile picture from his LinkedIn, I did notice a resemblance. I couldn't help but notice that he looked a lot like Huey Lewis And for those of you who know Huey Lewis, I'm hoping that at some point during the course of our presentation that Ted will treat us to some take on maybe Power of Love while riding a skateboard with Michael J. Fox through the streets of whatever little town that was. He's a good-looking guy. Go ahead. Why don't you give me a little intro, and then we'll pop into the tale about telecom.
Sure. I'm a Huey Lewis lookalike. So as the COO of EngagedPro and a founding partner, there's a group of us that have partnered with Direct Supply for quite a while now, several years, and I won't steal Tom's thunder, but we focused on the large operators. And you'll see from the presentation, hopefully, that this trickles down from a telecom and IT standpoint down to the independents who we're talking to today. So our focus is on simplifying, cost reduction, one point of contact.
I don't know about the people on this call, but my cell phone, I have not looked at my cell phone bill in probably 3 years. I have it on auto pay. The bill comes, the bill is paid. I haven't changed my service provider probably since 2013. And it turns out, if you want to go to the next slide, Doug, as we dug into this in the senior care space, no one else had either, right? And I'm not just talking about cellular. I'm talking about where you get your internet. I'm talking about where you get your landline. And in many cases, we had customers that couldn't even find the receipts, couldn't even find the bills or the invoices. Somebody in some arcane department in some of these big companies you see on the screen right now have been paying that bill, never knowing, is it the right amount? Are those lines still active? Am I getting what I need? You just pay it, right? And all at the end of the day you want is for when you pick up your phone or you log on to a web presentation like this, you just want your internet to work and your phone to work, right? Other than that, you put it on set and forget, you pay it, and you go. And so we've had the chance over the last couple of years to start to work with some of these big guys that you see on the screen. And the crazy thing was, even with a CIO, and I know that when you get down to some independent operators like yourselves, that person who is the CIO is also the head of procurement or is the head of legal or whatever it is. People wear a lot of hats, right? And this is not the main thing that you're focused on. You're focused on making sure you're able to make it through these uncertain times, making sure that you can deliver good quality to your residents and their families and take care of your caregivers. So what we're going to talk about ultimately is what we started to see as ways to save a decent amount of money here and use that money for more productive things. Do you want to pop onto the next slide, Doug, please? So to give you a sense of the scale, and we haven't been at this all that long. I suppose Ted probably says several years because it feels like it's been that long working with a guy like me. But over the course of even just the last, I think it's been less than 2 years, we've been able to secure on these contracts about over $4 million worth of savings. And we're pretty early in this. We haven't put an incredible amount of effort into it. But the emphasis, and I think it's worth pointing out here, has been on larger providers, right? Typically, these are 3-year contracts. And if you look at just that big fat number in the middle of the screen, what we're really focused on is getting really substantive savings that then providers can use for more productive things. Next slide. I anonymized it here just so we're not putting names to faces on some of these companies. But if you want to just look moving left to right here, you can kind of see the size of some of these senior living operators, what they were spending on a monthly basis before, what we're able to get it down to. That's pretty simple. That's what they save on a monthly basis. And then you look over the course of 3 years, and the reason we put that there is not just to inflate the number, but because these are typically 3-year contracts with providers. And in many cases, a lot of these operators had literally, in some cases, dozens, if not 100 on the high end, different contracts with different telecom or internet providers all around the country to serve the buildings that they have. We're able to get that down to one bill, as Ted said, and I don't want to steal all his thunder, while also saving them a lot of money. And Ted's going to get into some of the questions that I think a lot of you have right now as to, okay, well, let's just do it. What's the catch? I think what I found, even doing this for our own company, and by the way, Direct Supply, even though we have a terrible name, about 25% of our company is software engineers. So we got a lot of eggheads running around this building here. And they still, even in spite of that, when we had Ted work with us on some of our spend just on mobile coverage, we're able to save about 30%. 30%. And I got to say that a lot of us felt pretty dumb that money just been flowing out the window for years and years and years and years. And in all honesty, we hadn't looked at it. And so that's really what we want to pitch to you today and kind of get in front of you. One of the things that I want to point out, though, is that this is not meant to be disruptive to your business. So you're not going to switch from whatever you have right now to Cricket Wireless and Jim's internet hub down the street. We're talking about legitimate stuff that's not going to disrupt the operations of your business. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Huey Lewis himself, Ted Berg.
Yes, and the nuns reminded me in grade school to just move my lips and never sing, so I'm not going to do any renditions of Huey Lewis. So to Tom's point, we found a lot in the big operators, but what we found was even individual buildings were using different telecom providers for voice and data. And when we looked at them, we said, why can't we take this downstream and help the independent guys or the smaller guys? Because in the end, what we have is wholesale contracts with just about every carrier. So this slide, there's 6 carriers on here, but the little note underneath that says there's hundreds of other providers in our portfolio, and that crosses the entire IT spectrum, including telecom. So it's not just voice and data, it's data security, hosting, managed services, all those kind of things are part of our portfolio. But for the independents, we thought we'd focus on just getting the, kind of a good solid foundation for you guys by saving some money across the board on voice and data. And we do that through our leverage carrier contracts. So we're not just doing this through direct supply. We've got literally millions of dollars flowing through some of these carriers. What's that do? That gives us cost savings we pass along to our clients, which hopefully will be you guys. So the other thing I want to emphasize is part of that cost savings is a strategy that we sit down with you on and say, today you're using copper phone lines. Well, if anybody is aware of it or isn't aware of it, copper is going to be going away here in the near future. AT&T won't be supporting it, none of it. And so we've got some new technologies we'll bring to bear as part of our overall solution. Tom mentioned mobility. We also look at faxing. Just about everybody has some kind of fax protocol they have to go through. And by the way, if you're not using a specific kind of fax company, you're probably not using the right protocol for HIPAA. Cloud solutions, cybersecurity, I mentioned those as well. That top line connectivity is what we focus on. And to Tom's point, we'd like to save you enough money to, A, either reinvest with us on other technology or use it for resident experience. It's your decision on money that we can potentially save you what you do with. If you walk away from this webinar on our side, on the telecom side, know 2 things. We're going to try and save you money, but the biggest thing we can deliver is a single point of contact. So instead of any of your local directors trying to figure out who has my phone service because it's not working and not even know who to call, we're going to give you one number to call. It doesn't matter whether it's the end provider is AT&T or CenturyLink or Spectrum or Cox. It's a 1-800 number that's going to go into our 24/7 customer service center to answer all your questions and keep you up and running. The last bullet on there is really important. As Tom was mentioning, we ran into carriers that were literally getting hundreds of invoices once a month being rubber stamped and sent out the door to be paid. So what we'll end up doing is consolidating all those bills from those different carriers. So you get one bill that for each community, if you will, separated by cost center, so then you can cost allocate it appropriately. Hey, it's working, Doug. So you're asking yourself right now, what do I got to do? What's in it for me? Well, cost savings, simplicity, consolidations. How much time's involved? Initially, there's a couple of calls to set up a strategy and a project plan, but it's a decision, and then we take our team and run with it. Most of the big operators will have a weekly call with them just to kind of talk about each community. My guess is if you're independent and we have 1 or 2 or 3 communities, it's going to be a once a month kind of call. You'll still be communicated through emails and stuff. We want you to stay focused on your business. Let us help you run the telecom business. Do you have to change carriers or equipment? It really depends. Most of the time for your data side, you're going to have to change carriers, but the key is we're going to do it without disrupting the business. We're not going to disconnect anything without having the other circuit turned up and tested and usable. So we'll walk that through on the project plan as well. So bill flip, that's a technology term for if you have a local voice line. I mean, literally, we can just take it over and start sending you a bill from us, and hopefully there's cost savings involved. That's the ultimate there. And if you're under a contract, we'll sit down with you, find out what that contract runs through. We keep track of all those so that we can get out in front of it, say 6 or 9 months, and help a conversion where necessary. New agreements, Tom mentioned this earlier, still a little bit of thunder, but they're typically 3 years. We can usually do a little bit less, but then you run into some installation charges. What we've been able to do with our carriers, in addition to reducing costs, is eliminate all those kind of one-off first-time setup charges, right? And the bottom one, do I have contract with issues? One number to call. It doesn't matter. I mentioned earlier, it doesn't matter whether it's Spectrum or Cox or AT&T. Hope that answers some of your questions. And if you have others, you'll get a number to call at the end of this. So how do we do this? It's a pretty simple 3-step process. Send us a copy of your invoices. And why do we need that? Because it tells us where your location is, what services you have. We'll be able to compare that with some of our rates and come back with an idea of what the savings might look like. Have a strategy call with you to say, yes, that makes sense, or I want to upgrade my services. Some of those might be moving from typical phones, PBX kind of phones, to hosted phones, which you're all going to be doing in the near future anyway. And that call is exactly that. We'll sit down and walk through what we found, where you want to get to, kind of show you a path and down the road on technology. And then sign an MSA. It's pretty simple. The deployment process, step 3, is just sit down with our project team. We'll talk about timing, what gets deployed. We send out guys to install the equipment if it's necessary, and then obviously talk about ongoing support and management and billing and how we set up those invoices for you.
Typically, how we've done this in the past, Doug runs a group, Procurement Services. We tend to work with larger providers. So what we've seen, the numbers that we presented today, that 23 to 30% savings, those are with providers that tend to have some sense of scale, right, and usually have a dedicated CIO. What we've seen anecdotally on the independent side, where we're talking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 buildings, we're actually seeing higher savings, which makes sense, right? I mean, it's less scale, less emphasis on some of those contracts. But what we're looking to do here is, if you're interested, reach out on this number below. Otherwise, just write down this link, directsupply.com/telecom. It's pretty straightforward. We've got a link on there where you can actually just upload a couple of your invoices. We'll do all the work to analyze it and come back with a proposal. And the key here, honestly, when I say proposal, we can come to you and say, all right, we saw what you guys are doing. Here's what we can do with that in terms of price and everything else. You can take it or leave it. We're not here to jam anything down your throat. We're going to come back to you with a proposal, and if nothing else, you can see how much money you've been wasting over the course of the last few years. So thanks for listening to us. It's about to get better. I'm glad that we got to go first because we're about to switch to Doug. But
I'm ready to sing now. Yeah.
I'll pitch it back to Doug for the transition.
Well, thanks, Tom. Thanks, Ted. The point here is we know every operator right now is facing a lot of headwinds. All of our costs are up. This pandemic is unprecedented, and we have to try and head off some of those increased costs with different solutions. So if anything today, if this is a solution for you or not, start thinking a little bit out of the box at some of those ancillary categories where you may gain better control and savings from them. So next, I want to talk about another area that we've been exploring the past few years, and it's really in the medical waste management. We have found quite obviously a complex landscape there, many different players, many different contracts, many different prices. But I'm happy to introduce you today to Des Murillo from OnSite Waste Medical, where she's going to give us an overview of what they do and how they're disrupting the market. So Des, over to you.
Thank you, Doug, and thank you all for joining today's call. My name is Des, and I am OnSite's Channel Sales Manager. I've been with the company since 2019, and previously working in other specialties. We are actually across 33 specialties, and my focus then was in hormone injection clinics, pediatric, and dental. But I've since been pulled into the long-term care space to really build out a program specifically for SNFs and specifically for AL facilities. And part of this market research was looking at how it was, or the medical waste space was previous to COVID and now with COVID. And we've built out a program that adapts to all those changes. So if another pandemic happens, we can support that. And if another pandemic doesn't happen, this is still the best program for your facilities. Next slide. All right. So here are some of the common pain points we see in the space, and we'll run through some of these. So unfortunately, medical waste leaves your office, and like the phone bill, you don't see what you're paying. So what happens is all of a sudden, if you do look at your medical waste bill, you'll see that it's extremely high. And you might think, what the heck happened? I signed an agreement 20 years ago and it's not the same price. So what happens is you're built into these agreements that trap customers into annual increases about 5 to 7%. So if your contract is really old and it's been rolling over, you're paying much, much more today. The second part is the allotment model. Several vendors do this today. And what is the allotment model? The allotment model is essentially those cardboard boxes that your haulers pick up. The vendor tells you, hey, we're going to give you 100 boxes per year. They divide that by 12 and they come up with their monthly cost. Now, what does that do? That means if you use 50 of those 100 containers, you still pay for the 100. And if you go over the 100, which a lot of facilities did this year because of COVID, they make sure to trap you into overage charges. Now, demanding storage constraints, I know a lot of facilities felt this year. We hop on calls all the time where we have facilities talk about how they had to rent out pods because they don't have space within their facility to store the medical waste. Your volume has dramatically increased by fivefold in several situations. And now you also have regulatory paperwork. So I'm speaking to your manifest. These are vital for audits. It's recommended you have them on file for about 3 years. So what that process looks like is the hauler gives you a paper manifest, you log it in a binder, and then you have your staff running around like crazy collecting all these binders and paperwork if you do have an audit. So it's not ideal. And I'm just going to be jumping around, but another one is ordering inventory. This is to show that there's a lot of people involved in this process. It's not just throwing the trash out. So you typically have a nurse keeping count of your plastic red sharps containers. And then you have an administrator, someone for procurement, ordering these containers on an on-needed basis from a different vendor. And then if you have multiple vendors and you're across several states, it's more of a hint that your pricing is all over the place. It's a fragmented program. Everyone's doing something differently. You're signing contracts at the site level, and that's not ever ideal. Next slide. So what we did is we looked at all of these common pain points and we built out a program that's all-encompassing and specific to long-term care to ensure its success under every type of environment, whether it's a pandemic or not. So we call it the 3T approach. The first T is technology. Each of your sites is equipped with technology to immediately sterilize your infectious waste on site. Now, for your isolation cases, you still have pickups. But we do pickups very differently. So it's transactional pickups. You only pay for what you need. We allow flexible pickup schedules, optimizing your usage and spend. So there's no overage charges or fees or anything of that nature. And we'll dive into all of these more in a second. And then the third piece, and this is the biggest value specifically to skilled nursing facilities, is an educational approach and consultative approach to medical waste segregation. What is considered red bag waste and what's considered regular trash? There's no vendor today that provides that guidance. So today, your facilities are more likely than not placing it all into red bags. So jumping into the first one. So the first one is technology. Each of your facilities is equipped with a smart device that turns your medical waste into regular trash on site. That's right. So it's on site. You don't have to have a hauler pick this up. This is now regular trash. It's a 3 simple step process. You collect your waste, you place a whole container into the unit, you click start, and then 2.5 hours later, it's regular trash you can throw away. So the collection process is identical to what you're doing today. Nothing changes. Instead of using those plastic red sharps containers, we transition you to our tin split containers. These do fit in those lock and key brackets that most of you are using. These brackets are found on med cards, patient rooms, and shower rooms. So nothing changes from a collection standpoint. So process. The process is the same. So today what your facilities are doing, they take that plastic red sharps container off the wall, and then they place it in, there's Tom with the unit. So it's about the size of a microwave, but typically what you guys are doing today, you take that plastic red sharp container off the wall, and then you take it to your buy room and you place it in a cardboard box. Now with us, what that process looks like, you take that container off the wall, you place it in this fancy box, and you click start. And then 2.5 hours later, it's regular trash you can throw away. So a little bit about the unit, as you can see, it's about the size of a microwave. All it needs is a regular 110 power outlet, and it can be located anywhere within your facility. Most choose to keep it in the buy room just for implementation reasons. It's easiest, but it doesn't need a ventilated room. And again, it can be located anywhere within your facility. There's no heat given off. I always love to say you can hug it. It doesn't get warm. And then it is a smart device. So it has its own commercial Verizon signal, and it speaks to a cloud, doing 3 things for you. It will do auto fulfillment of your containers, all your regulatory reporting, and maintenance of itself. So after a full cycle is complete, the whole container gets tossed out into the regular trash. There's no handling of your medical waste. We can go on to the next slide, Doug. And to dive a little bit more into the smart technology. So we talked about how today you have a nurse keeping count of your plastic red sharps container, and somebody like an administrator then ordering containers on an on-needed basis. That all goes away with our solution, and this is the biggest feedback we get from our nurses and the feature they love the most. It's the auto fulfillment feature. So let's say your facility has a reserve volume of 10, and you can choose this reserve volume, but let's say it's 10 to make it easy. So once the unit counts that you are at 10 containers on your site, it will automatically then place another order of containers that get shipped to your doorstep. So this is all automated. Your staff no longer have to actively manage your inventory. The second piece to this is all regulatory reporting. So that painful process of collecting all paperwork and putting in a logbook, storing it up 3 years, that all goes away. All your data and all regulatory reporting, whether it's the truck pickup or the use of the unit, is all on a portal for you. So if you do have an audit, what that process looks like is logging onto this portal, clicking on your site, and clicking print. Super easy. And then the last piece is that it does maintenance of itself. But also, like your iPhone, there are new features that just get pushed down through the cloud. Our newest feature being a delayed start feature, so the unit can run at night if you choose to. It doesn't require monitoring. All right, so if you haven't already, you might be thinking, what do I do with all my isolation waste? So this is an all-encompassing program, so we infuse technology and now the truck pickups. We do truck pickups very differently. So one, we do protected pricing. There's 0 hidden fees, 0 annual charges. What you might find if you go look at your invoices today or sometime this week is that you'll have environmental fees, you'll have COVID PPE fees, you'll have fuel charges. There's no reason for these additional fees. So we take all of that away and protect that pricing throughout the agreement. The second piece is transactional cost. So we talked about that allotment model where you're either set up to pay for what you don't need, or if you go over what they allot you for, then you're paying overage charges. That model out the window. What we do is you pay for what you need. So if that's 1 container a month and 100 the next month, we're here to support your needs. And then the third piece is flexible schedules. So a lot of you, when you sign an agreement, you're locked into this pickup frequency. If you want to go outside that frequency, there's another overage charge. That changes with us. We're here to support your needs. As a lot of you might have experienced this year, you might have been on an every 4-week pickup frequency and needed to be on weekly because you became a COVID positive unit. We don't want to give you an overage charge because of that. We're just here to support that change with you. Next slide. And then the third piece and the biggest value is training with OnSite. So this really sets us apart from every vendor. We dive into waste segregation. If you were to reach out to your current vendor today and you were to ask them, hey, what do I do with this PPE? Do I put this in red bag or do I put this in regular trash? I guarantee they tell you to put it in red bag. They charge you per container, they charge you per pound. What we do is we take a consultative approach, and part of that is partnering with leading medical waste experts that have been involved in writing policies for Congress on waste segregation. So we dive into, at the state level, what's considered red bag waste, what's considered regular trash. We align with your leadership team on what processes you guys agree to change, and we help support that at the site level. With that comes a quarterly volume analysis. We know we can train your staff once, but old behaviors might come back again, or you might have new staff members that didn't know about waste segregation, so they go back to old behavior, putting just everything into red bag. So through our trend analysis program, we capture those volume spikes and we intervene at the site level. We also provide insight at the corporate level, which does not exist today, on what all your facilities are doing, whether that's, hey, look, good news, you're decreasing your volume, or hey, look, this site is spiking. That reporting doesn't exist today, and there's limited insight to the site level, usage and volume. And then the third piece is consulting services. You guys are extremely busy and with taking care of your patients, vaccines, getting PPE. The last thing is, hey, am I on the appropriate frequency? So what we do through the trend analysis, we can track, hey, look, the site is on weekly schedules. They're averaging 1 box per week. This frequency no longer makes sense for them. So we proactively call you. We call your administrator or DOM, depending on who you determine that person to be. And we say, hey, congrats, your volume decreased. Would you be like, you would more benefit from being on a every 4-week pickup schedule. Would you like to make that change? We get the green light and then we make that change for you. So we're proactively monitoring your volume and ensuring that you're on the best service level for your facilities at the site level. So with that, we eliminate all those common pain points. Pricing, there's so much savings in this. You know, people don't look at their medical waste, but I highly recommend to look at it. Are you doing the allotment model? What fees do you have? Is there anyone educating your staff on waste segregation? What does your storage constraints look like? So all of this goes away with our solution, and I have a few customer success slides coming up, which are fantastic. So for the first customer success slide, Doug, if you want to move forward. For the first customer success slide, this is what we were able to do for an assisted living. For an assisted living, it's very much different, where all they need is our technology. We completely eliminate the need for hauling for assisted living, which means you're immediately sterilizing your infectious waste, you're no longer storing your infectious waste, and you're reducing foot traffic into your facilities. This is a screenshot of a spend of a 19-location assisted living, where they were across several states, which means more than likely there were a lot of vendors, which was the case for them. And we were able to come in and provide them with smart technology to immediately sterilize their infectious waste, provided them about 45% in savings, and brought transparency to their spend. Standardization across all sites with a great program. Next slide. And then for skilled nursing, this is the most remarkable part of all this program, is the waste segregation piece. So like I mentioned, today a lot of facilities are putting just everything into red bag waste. So this is a screenshot of the volume report of a skilled nursing facility that came on board with us back in March of last year, so right when the pandemic started. They were previously on a weekly pickup schedule, averaging about 30 boxes a month. Today, and with OnSite's approach, they're on an every 4-week pickup schedule, or every 4-week pickup schedule, and averaging about 3 to 4 boxes a month. That's a 75% volume reduction and 82% in savings. And that's great there, but let's look at what they were previously doing. So part of what their program looked like, they were stuck in inflexible schedules. They had overage charges, which they were experiencing because their volume was increasing. They were in that allotment model we talked about, out of control volume. There was no insight to the site level on what is my site doing, why is their volume so high? And we were able to decrease their volume by 75%, bring savings, reduce foot traffic into their facilities, and just create efficiencies and standardize everything onto one agreement with protected pricing. And that is the end of our presentation. So for next steps, I do have my contact info on the next slide. But what we do for all facilities is we do free consultations. So we look at your current program, we highlight findings, and we might give you a pat on the back like, hey, look, you're doing a great job, or hey, look, you should really look at these current processes in your current program, and this is the program we would propose that's more optimal for your usage. And happy to connect with you guys. My number's on the slide as well as my email.
Thank you, Des. And thank you, Tom, Ted, and Des for your presentations today. Very insightful. Again, to my point, there is savings out there. There's disruptors of the market that can help you bring on new technology to really help you with the headwinds that you face today. The information I'll leave on the screen for a couple more minutes. Maybe you can take a snapshot of it or write it down if you want to learn more about either of these. But on behalf of Direct Supply and myself, we want to say thank you. Thank you for everything you do every single day. We know it's not easy. It's very, very difficult. But what you're doing is really incredible. And thank you from all of us at Direct Supply. We wish you healthiness and safe. If there's any questions that you have, again, if you want to learn more, please feel free to reach out to any one of us. Thank you very much.